Hey everybody, it's Sierra. I really wish we were all here in person for the skill swap this year, but I'm super grateful for Crosshatch and Title Track for keeping it going virtually. So we're here at the farm. It's a beautiful day, and we're actually going to start with the basswood tree. And if any of you have been on the herb walks with me here before, we usually end at a different basswood, but we were standing here talking, so I thought let's start with this. So basswood's one of my favorite medicines, really. Or remedies rather. I love making tea with the flowers. This is actually the flower here, which it is a little confusing. This tree has heart-shaped leaves, really easy to identify it by. But then the flower actually is part of a modified leaf here, leaf bract, and this is the flower. It's not quite open yet, so in another maybe 5 or so days we'll see little white flowers coming out of each of those buds, but this whole piece here is actually considered the flower. When it's in flower, it's really easy to see from a long ways out because these are so much lighter than the big leaves that they kind of glisten and shimmer in the sun, so it's easy to spot all the way across the field in flower. So I like to harvest these when they're fully open, so in about 5 days or more, and you kind of have to be careful because the bees also absolutely love them, and there are a lot here, so we'd have to be very mindful when we're picking. But I use these fresh, I dry them. They are one of my favorite teas. It's heart opening, it's good for digestion, specifically good for the vagus nerve pathway that connects our head brain and our gut brain. So helping communication flow better from those two places, which is really important because 70 to 90% of our serotonin is produced in our gut. So in order for it to get all the way up here and make us feel joyful and secure and happy, we need to have good communication along that nerve pathway. So linden can really help with that. It's really good for folks who have had disrupted digestion or like have irritable intestines or kind of fluctuating bowel movements. This can be a really nice remedy. It's soothing, so if we chew it up, which I'm going to spare doing because I just realized that I'm going to be talking with it in my mouth, but if we chew this up, it's quite mucilaginous, so it's kind of slimy in the mouth, and that is part of the medicine. That's the soothing medicine. So I like to talk about, in France, it's really commonly used as an evening beverage after you have guests over for dinner and wine, and it's really nice to soothe the stomach. So if you picture, like, we have a layer of skin, just like our external skin, on the lining of our intestines. And that skin is only 1 cell thick. And so it really doesn't take much to disrupt that. But those cells turn over rather quickly. So it can take just a little nudge to heal it too. So if you've had something really drying and astringent, or some really heavy meal that could be irritating that skin there, having some linden tea afterwards can be really nice. And it's a nice way to get ready for bed. It's a really calming, relaxing tea, but it's, I realized I'm calling it linden, but that is typically a common name used for the European variety of basswood. This is the North American variety, Tilia americana, but it can be used interchangeably as far as a tea made with the flowers and the leaves. So I really like using linden or basswood for when we need to return a sense of childlike joy to the heart, or when the nerves are totally fried. And I would say that most of us right now could use both of those things, along with its other wonderful benefits. So if you're out and about, keep your eyes out for these big heart-shaped leaves right now, and it's a perfect time to get your eye on a nice harvesting spot because the flowers will be ready soon. In the springtime, you can also eat the buds, or even right now I see there are still some young new leaves here. So these new leaves, we could eat these in a salad or just munch them up. They're really yummy. Not bitter at all, really sweet, really tender. You can cook them. You can make cordage with the inner bark. And a good way to do that is to find a basswood that's growing near the river, because likely that will be putting out longer, straighter branches. So I could keep talking about linden, but we'll see what else we find as we go. Well, I noticed this plant when I was doing my little grounding exercise before we are filming this. And it's not a plant that I work with all that often. It's greater campion. So the bladder campion have their flowers out already. These are just coming, but it's those kind of sack-like flowers. They almost look like a little lantern. And these are bigger. These are a little less common than the bladder campion, which we see really everywhere. But I have a little story. So on Sunday, I was teaching a herbal intensive, and as part of that, and as part of my daily herb practice, I practice walking in deer mind. And what that means to me is that I basically just walk around and pretend I'm a deer. And it's a really good way to get in touch with your instinctual self. And a really good way to shed our judgmental, human minds. And the most challenging part of that for me is when I'm doing my deer walks and I see a plant. If I'm not fully in my deer mind, I'll automatically want to identify the plant and say in my mind, oh, that's this, and I know that's good for this, and is it ready to harvest for this? But the whole goal in the deer mind exercise is to basically shut that voice off. And so when I'm looking at a plant, I'm really just observing it very acutely in the moment for what it is. This is an amazing practice for life, and it's actually helped me to see other people in this way more, which is really a beautiful thing. So, long story short, on Sunday at the Herbal Intensive, we took a little deer mind break, and the first thing that my deer mind said when I got into deer mind was, I'm going to take a nap right here. I was like, no. I had to intervene because that was what my instincts really wanted to do. But I encouraged my deer self to keep walking. And as I was walking, I saw this plant, and this voice in my head said, yum, yum, yum. And I know that these are edible, and I have eaten the leaves off the bladder campion, the smaller ones, in salads and things, but honestly they're not all that great, and so I never really paid this one much attention as an edible. But I thought, well, I'll just go with it. So as a deer would, I just kind of leaned over and plucked off some of the tips with my mouth. And I noticed that a lot of the other ones growing nearby had the same thing done to them, just kind of plucked right there. And so I'm imagining those were some other deer in the neighborhood. I usually stay away from the ones.
Spitty ones?
Yeah.
Is this one a good one?
Well, it has a little bit of this underneath, but this is a good one if you want to try it.
Sure.
So, yeah, they're actually really tasty. I proceeded to sit there and eat maybe like 5 or 6 of them. And, yeah, they're sweet. They're really not too bitter. They're very green tasting. So I found a really nice new wild food. And I will say that, when I wild harvest plants for salads or things like that, the majority of them, I just really go with moderation. And part of that is sustainable harvesting. And part of it is that, most wild plants are much stronger than cultivated plants. So we don't need a lot. But also they could have, small amounts of alkaloids or things in them that we don't want in large doses. So as a rule of thumb, if I'm picking something for a salad or a meal, I just don't go into excess, just a little bit and add it in as an addition, or just get a little bit of a lot of things, which was the way, right? That's the way. So it's a fun recent story there. Let's see. Oh, here's one that's just flowering, so you can see the flower. It's kind of got that little sack on there. And this is actually, it's in the pink family, which is the same family as chickweed. And while this is a very different plant, if any of you know what chickweed looks like, this is a really similar shape. of how the flower comes out with the little leaves right there. The flowers are a bit different, but anatomically they are similar, which is why they're in the same family. And knowing plant families can be really important. Knowing that plant family, I know that most of the plants in that family have a lot of saponins. So that's a good indicator that, well, I might not want to eat too much of this plant raw because it could be irritating. But on the other hand, I could probably take this plant and crush it up and mix it with some water and do my laundry in it if I had to. Talk about the violet here. We have some violets. These are woodland violets, and these will have the earlier in the year had little yellow flowers, and now we see here they're true flowers. These I use similarly to field violets, but I don't use them as generously. So these are a little bit stronger in some of the compounds than the field violets. So we want to use them just more as maybe an energetic medicine or a light dose medicine, as opposed to like field violets. I would eat a whole salad full of them if they're really lush. But the medicine of violet energetically really is it's a really, really helpful ally for folks who are having trouble opening up or coming out of their shell. And I like to use plants like this. So violet itself, there's like some sayings about, violets being shy, and there's a lot of folklore and things, but the way that they grow, they actually, when they're coming out of the ground, they look like really shy little beings kind of opening up. They come out all curled up in the spring, and then they so slowly open, and then they do this cool thing, and they put out a false flower. So they put out a flower that's really just for show, because they're actually pollinated by ants. So later in the year, after their showy flower is gone, they put out their true flowers and get pollinated by ants. And I think and their true flowers are like green, so you hardly even notice them.
Yeah, they're like this little green kind of a ball almost, right?
Yeah, well, this is going to produce some seeds, so.
Oh, yeah.
I think this has already been fertilized, although, yeah, I think so. I'm not sure. But I think that's a really cool way to get to know plants, is by watching how they grow and learning about their personalities. And to me, that seems like a really nice moderation for a shy person, right? To not necessarily come out with like a false personality, right? Because it's a beautiful flower. It's very a real flower. But they're not putting it all out there at once. What they're putting out there, is this beauty and this offering. But they're still managing to keep their true self, kind of protected and subtle. So I think that's a nice ally for folks that maybe could relate to that. And this is, the more and more I work with plants, this is the way that I like to work with them. I started out learning a lot of constituents and botanical names, and I find those things still helpful, but more and more I find that getting to know the plant as a person and who it is, not just in relationship to how it can benefit us, but also asking how can we benefit it? How can we have a reciprocal relationship, or is that the thing to do right now? So those are probably the more important questions to be asking. I guess we could keep walking and see what else we find. Some red clover, which is also ready right now. So, I really like talking about the plants that are ready to harvest now. Little cricket friend. So red clover flowers twice in the year, actually. So if you miss this harvest, there will be another chance in August, but it's a shorter window and less prolific. The red clover is important to differentiate from the other clovers, and the key indicators are the color of the flower and the size. These are much bigger than most other clover flowers in the area, and they have this really distinct purple color. It can sometimes be really dark purple. These are a little lighter, but a good indicator is this kind of arrow pattern on the leaf there. And the leaves are pretty large. So it's important to differentiate this from the white or other clovers, because this is the only one that we really want to use internally. Some of the other clovers contain too many coumarins and could be too blood thinning to use internally. And when we're using the red clover, we want to just use the flower. The leaves, again, have some things in there we don't want to ingest too much of. But the flower here is very fun to pick. Again, watch for bees. But a really, really wonderful ally for so many things, but respiratory health actually being one of them. Not what it gets the most press for, but it's a really wonderful respiratory ally for like stagnant phlegm. Red clover is a really good mover of lymphatic fluid, and it works with the fluids in the body. So it helps regulate the lymphatic fluid, it helps regulate the blood, it helps with bile production in the liver, it helps women's menstrual flows. So it's a lover of the fluids. So if we have stagnant fluids, red clover is a really nice place to go. And that could look like maybe like stagnant liver function, or it could look like swollen breasts, really swollen tender breasts around the menstrual cycle, or some edema in the arms or the legs, or it could look like kind of like stagnant fluid and just kind of phlegm in the respiratory tract. So I bring that up because as we're heading into this fall, I know a lot of us, and we're not heading into fall, I should not be saying that. We are not even at this peak of summer yet.
It happens so fast, though.
It does happen so fast. In my mind, this time of year, as each thing comes into season, is what do I need to harvest so I have it next winter? So I'm thinking about that as I'm seeing some of these things pop up. And for sure, one of the things that I would like to harvest and have a little jar of on hand for myself personally is red clover, because I know it to be such a nice ally for the respiratory system. And I think a lot of us are thinking ahead to, how can we really build up that part of our bodies and have remedies on hand. So some red clover would be really nice for that. Also, you can just drink it as a tea for its mineral content. It's very high in minerals and B vitamins. So a lot of times women around menopause benefit a lot from red clover because it can help. It has phytoestrogens, so without going too far into that, because that's a whole other conversation, we'll just say that it can be a really helpful ally during that time, and very protective for women's breast health too.
I've popped it in salads fresh too.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's good in salads fresh, or just munching on the flowers, or you can make an infused vinegar with them.
Oh, nice.
Tincture is not really where it's at. I think, when I think of red clover, I'm thinking it's more food-like, so I would be more inclined to put it in a salad, or you can even dry them and grind them and add it to flour as a flour additive.
Nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the thing to be aware of when harvesting these is, if you're touching it all over like I am with this one, when it dries it will be brown. If you don't touch it, then it stays this beautiful shade of purple. So the way that I manage to do that is usually I pick them like so, and then when I get home, I very carefully just then pinch off the flour into my bowl or onto my tray. And then if you're drying them, they can't touch each other or they turn brown. So it's fine if they turn brown. It's just so beautiful to have them stay this purple color. Sometimes they even get really darker and they all different shades. So I think I like looking at my jar of dried red clover as much as I like using it. But another thing to be aware of is that they do harbor some molds later in the year. So right now is a really good time to harvest, but if we're going to go at that second flowering, which happens in August usually, then we're going to have to worry about molds depending on how wet it is, more so some years than other. But we always want to make sure there are no molds on anything we're wild harvesting, because it can take something really beneficial and make it really not so great for you.
Can I tell you the cheesy saying I made up to remember what red clover is good for?
Yes.
Red clover, send cellular detoxification on over.
Nice. I love it. Yes. Cellular detoxification. Basically.
It's like a really wordy thing to say for everything you just said.
Yeah, I would say, you know, most plants are helpful for that.
Yeah, fair enough.
Oh, we can talk about this one. That's fun. So this is hemp agrimony or cinquefoil, and a lot of people think that it is pot, and it is not. But it is a really great plant. So one way you can tell if it's pot, if you're wondering, is to crush some up and smell it. That's a really telltale sign. Definitely not.
What does it smell like?
Like, not much. It does not have a strong smell. It's not an aromatic plant. So really it just smells like green. It's in the rose family, which is really helpful to know. Again, this is where plant families are so helpful, because when I first learned about this plant, that's about all I knew. And there isn't a lot of information out there about using it for different things. But knowing that it's in the rose family, I now know that it is astringent, mostly. That's the one thing that all rose family plants have in common. They're all astringent. But I could probably guess that it might be really nice for headaches. I could probably, and I don't know how I know that actually. So that's just a random intuition, which is not so random, and it is all valid. You should always fact check it, but honestly, listening to our intuition is probably one of the most important parts in getting to know plants, and allowing ourselves to have space for that voice to be heard. So I have used this for headaches with really good results. And I also would, just by knowing that it's in the rose family, know that it's probably okay to experiment with, topically especially. And so, you know, making a tea and using it as a wash for, like if you have like mosquito bites, like I did there, or if you have been out berry picking, which hopefully we all will be soon, and then you have scratches all up and down your leg, or arms and legs. A really nice thing to do is you can use raspberry leaves for this too, which are also in the rose family. But make a tea with those leaves and then use it as a wash. So just kind of, you know, you can take a washcloth and wipe it on, or just pour it over yourself. So those are some things I've done with this plant. But there are definitely some more magical uses and things like that. I have wanted for some time to make a flower essence, but haven't, so it's in the future.
Can you tell us a little bit about flower essences?
Sure. I'm really on a kick with them right now. So to make a flower essence, basically, I'm looking to see if there's a flower. Well, we could make some with this campion over here. But the process is really simple. You take a little jar and or a glass dish. I like to use clear glass myself, and put a little bit of water in. You don't want too much, because a little bit of flower essence goes a very long way. So I usually just use like an ounce or two, and put it out. You have to have a sunny day, and then you pick a flower and put it upside down in the water in the little bowl. And you can use one flower, you can use 2 or 3 or 5, usually not more than 5. That's kind of a lot. It's an energetic medicine, so just don't need too much of it. And what you're doing is you're imprinting the energy of the flower into the water. So similar to the experiments where they were, you know, trying to focus like love onto the water, and then taking pictures of the water molecules and seeing how they had changed. they change when we put a flower in there, and that actually changes the whole nature of the water. I had heard of flower essences for years, and it's only been in like the last 5 years that I've really gotten into them. And I have to say, the most profound healing that I've witnessed from herbs has been from flower essences. And I think it's because they have a really great way of reaching down to the root of what's going on, which is what we're always wanting to do. You know, most of the time symptoms are just, you know, the surface. And when we dig under all of the symptoms, what we always end up with is trauma. And that can be really hard to reach. And there are a lot of really great modalities for working with trauma, but flower essences can be really magical. And I really like having them because it feels like a non-human ally to walk you through that healing journey. So you're not doing it alone, but sometimes it can be easier to walk through those difficult places with a plant than with another human. So I really like to empower people to, this is a pun I accidentally made the other day, but I'm going to in purpose make it right now, to think out of the box when it comes to flower essences. And if you don't get it, it's box.
Bach flower essences.
Flower remedies. So the Bach is the number one type of flower essences you'll find, and it flower essences were actually developed by, I don't know his first name, Richard? I don't know.
Bach.
Bach.
Mr. Bach.
Mr. Bach. And he really opened the doorway for a lot of us, but I feel that flower essences are a very personal thing, and so I encourage people to not look up what other people say about the flower essence if you're going to make one, and instead choose a flower that resonates with you, and use something that is significant to your healing journey, whatever that is. It might be that when you were a kid, you used to go out with your grandma and pick daisies all the time. And now your grandma has recently passed and you need something to help you through that. Making a flower essence of daisies could be really perfect. And that might not be on any list of what daisies are good for. So flower essences are fun too because you can use plants that you wouldn't ingest a lot of normally, but you want to make sure it's not something really toxic.
Like a datura or something
yes,
like that.
Right, yeah, and you know, you can actually get datura flower essence, but it is extremely, extremely diluted. So I don't recommend that one to make yourself. But you know, it's something like, say, bloodroot, where we're not wanting, it's a very caustic plant, we don't want to ingest much of the plant. And I don't really recommend picking the flowers, you know, generally, unless there was a big amount of it. But to be able to harvest one flower from a big patch and make a remedy from it that you can work with in a safe way is a really cool and sustainable option. And it is just a wonderful way to build relationship with the plant, too. So right now is a wonderful time to get out and make flower essences. Oh, important part. So after you've let it sit, I kind of digress there. So you've got your bowl, you got your water in it, you got your flower upside down in there, or 3 or 5 maybe. I always like odd numbers. And then you put it out in the sun for a few hours, like anywhere from a half an hour to 3 hours is usually my rule of thumb. I would say if you're thinking about pulling it in and asking yourself, has it been out there long enough? Just go get it, because so many times I've asked myself that and thought, oh no, I'll give it another hour, and then I forget about it. So that's what I've learned. As soon as I think about it, that means it's ready.
Your intuition, it seems like this is a theme here. Your intuition really knows
Yes.
what to do with the plants.
Yes. Which, yeah, is something we all, you know, have innately within us. It's just learning to get the other stuff out of the way and reclaim authority over our own beings and our own healing journeys. It's a big part of it. So we got our water out here with our flower in the sun for half an hour to 3 hours. And when we feel intuitively that it is ready to take it in, then we take our jar or bowl out of the sun, remove the flowers, and then we want to add at least have 25% alcohol for preservation now with our water. If we just store the water, of course it'll tastes like swamp in a while. So if we have, say, 3/4 cup of this essence that we've made, then we would want to add no less than 1/4 cup of 100 proof vodka is what I like to use. I like using vodka. Some folks use brandy and things, but I like vodka because it's flavorless and it's colorless. So if you get any little subtle flavors or colors from the flower, you can really experience those. And then your flower essence is now shelf stable. You can add more alcohol if you want to, but that's the minimum. And you can then go one of two routes. I tend to just use it as is, put it in a little bottle, label it well, very important. And it's really fun to keep track of more things than you would think when you're labeling, like how you were feeling that day, how the weather was that day, how wet the year had been, because later down the road you might make another batch and notice a big difference. So it's just fun to have that information. And also, I always personally think I'm going to remember way more than I do about a harvest or about what's in this random blue bottle. I have a whole pile of random bottles that I'm not sure, it's like a mystery grab. You can do that, or you can do the other route, which is a little more traditional in the homeopathic or flower essence realm, which would be to save what you now have in your jar with the alcohol as your mother, and then take that and take just only a couple drops and put it into a new bottle with alcohol and water. I have found both to be really effective, and I guess I just feel like if I'm making even an ounce or two of flower essence and then I'm only using a couple drops, and maybe it's more powerful that way. I don't know. You can try it out and do it any way. That's the whole point. Yeah, do it your way. But that is a general outline. And usually when using flower essences, I like to use small doses. So like 1 to 3 drops on or under the tongue is a really nice way to use them. And they're subtle, but super powerful. So you might not notice anything right away. And it might even be that you're taking a flower essence for a week or two, and then after a week or two you notice that you're feeling some really subtle but deep changes within yourself. And oftentimes we forget to even remember that it might have been the flower essence that was helping us. And that's when we know we're really using the right herb at the right time, when it's like so natural and gradual and slow, the process of healing, that we hardly even realize what happened. You kind of have to take a minute to look back and say, oh wow, I'm in a totally different state than I was when we started that journey. Well, this one's in flower, so it's calling out. It's looking like it's going to be a great berry year, y'all. I'm pretty excited. If we get a little more rain, we're in good shape for good berries. So this is a blackberry. And how I can tell it's a blackberry and not a raspberry is because it has these thorns. And raspberries are very prickly, but they're just like small prickles all over. And
kind of like sharp fuzz.
Yeah, exactly. And then blackberries have actual thorns. So if you're out picking and you get like a cut on your arm, you can assume that's blackberry. Also, raspberries, the bottom side of the leaf is quite a bit lighter than the top side of the leaf, and we can see here with blackberry, not so. It's just a little lighter, but similar.
Gives that another good flip.
So, yeah, the raspberry is almost like a white on the bottom. Blackberries darker. So I really like using raspberry leaf primarily for tea, but blackberry leaf has some really good indications too. We can use the blackberry leaf. It's a very tannin-rich tea, so it's kind of dark, it's bitter, it's a little astringent. So it would be nice for a wash on our arms if we made it that way. But it's really nice for diarrhea, so especially in children. This is like #1 thing that I would go for diarrhea. And you can harvest it any time of the year even, so like, you know, right now it would be wonderful to harvest the leaves, but we could even use the root. It would be a stronger astringent medicine. Usually, you know, we don't need that, but sometimes we might. So we can also even use the dried canes in the wintertime if that's all we have. You know, it's one that's always around. And then right now, we could make a nice flower essence with this. And A lot of that, energetics of blackberry to me is all about boundaries. So, obviously really good at boundaries, these thorns. This is a plant that knows how to keep good boundaries, but also how to be super generous and offer us these abundant, nourishing fruits. And I think it's interesting to note that a lot of plants that have really abundant, generous, nourishing fruits also have really great ways of protecting themselves. And I think that's a lesson to all of us, that to be able to be hands open, heart open, offering, we have to keep those healthy boundaries in order to keep ourselves alive. If blackberries didn't have thorns on them, can you imagine how the patches would look by midsummer when all the people were trampling through them? The only thing that keeps them from getting totally trampled down is that they're really pokey, and you don't always want to go in very far, and then that leaves some for the bears. So it's a pretty good method of keeping the humans at bay. Here we have some geranium. This is a wild geranium, or crane's bill. You can see where it gets that name.
Oh yeah, let's see that here. Crane's bill.
So this is related to the same pot geranium that a lot of people grow. This is a wild relative, and it is not so fragrant, but it has these beautiful little purple flowers. Again, really astringent. So this is one that might be nice for diarrhea as well, or as a wash for the skin. This one can be really nice to make a facial toner with. Geranium has a really nice affinity for facial tissue, and some of the more fragrant geraniums we really like for that, but this can be nice as a toner for somebody that has really oily or acne prone skin. It's very anti-infective, so really nice if you were out and you got a cut that you were concerned about getting an infection. Just chewing up a poultice of this would be really a nice thing to help cleanse that out. So it's good to know a lot of cleansing herbs, because if you get a cut and you're out somewhere, you want to just be able to grab something nearby. So it's good to have a variety. I'm just going to talk about autumn olive oil just a minute. It's almost done flowering. Looks like this one is, but if you can find some that's still flowering, the flowers are beautifully fragrant. And some of them still are. Here's some past flowers. This one's they're just starting to dry up. But the flowers are gorgeous smelling and wonderful as a tea, or even infused into honey. Really nice. You can maybe make a flower essence with them. So I have a funny confession about this plant. I have loved and known this plant for years, and it's one of my favorite fall harvests, partially because by the time the berries are ready, everything else is slowed down just a little, so it's really one that I can have time for. And the berries are literally a superfood, extremely high in lycopene, tons of anti-cancer activity, tons of anti-inflammatory activity, high in iron and omegas and fatty acids, all in there. So, and of course, like vitamin C and vitamin A and tons of antioxidants. So I have been saying for years, but I'm just going to keep saying it till somebody does it. Somebody really needs to start a autumn olive superfood company, and you can make fruit leather. Is probably the best. Maybe just stick with fruit leather, but you can dry them. They're really nice dried for teas and things. But they truly are a superfood, just like goji berries. They're like our local superfood, and so many folks are hating on them. So I've been loving this plant for years, and just kind of also loving the paradox or the story that it really brings up in conversations of invasive species, and really forces us to look at that, which this plant was really propagated here by us intentionally as food for wildlife. It's a nitrogen fixer for the soil. So, originally we thought it was this wonderful thing, and now it's really thriving everywhere, and now we think it's this terrible thing that we need to destroy with Roundup, because that's really going to help the native plants. It's all kind of mixed up, but I think it brings up a really good conversation that extends even outside the plant world. And so ironically, this whole time that I've been loving this plant, I never knew it had thorns until this year. It has very subtle thorns, and it has like a lot of knobby branches. These aren't really thorns, but every once in a while it has an actual very sharp thorn. And I don't see any right here. See, they're hard to see. But it wasn't until I was recently I was doing a land consult on somebody's land, so just walking around with them and showing them the plants that were there and what their names were and who they were. And then I started talking about autumn olive, and she just got so upset and was like, "Oh, that blasted plant, I'm trying to get rid of it everywhere, and those thorns." And I was like, "It has thorns?" I think she kind of wondered if I knew any of my stuff, because I didn't even know autumn olive had thorns. But it was kind of I thought it was very ironic and funny that everybody's been hating this, and here I am, I didn't even know it had thorns. So I guess you find what you're looking for. But I think it's a plant that, because it's here and it's abundant and it's offering us so much vitality, it would be silly of us to hate on this one, destroy it, and then order goji berries from across the world where they are in danger, right? So, just saying, love on your autumn olives if you got them, and if we, get really into eating them, then they won't be propagating as fast. So, win-win. So here's some raspberry. I just wanted to show the difference since we had a nice close-up of the blackberry. See how bright white that is on the back, bright light green. And then along here, no thorns, just very prickly stems. And raspberry is a really well-known remedy for women who are pregnant. That's probably what it gets the most, attention for. But I want to point out that it is a really wonderful herbal tea for women who are either coming into out of maiden and into mother, or out of mother and into crone. So those transition periods, really raspberry leaf is a wonderful friend for women their whole lives, but especially for those transition periods. For the coming of age of puberty, it's really helpful for engaging the reproductive muscles and getting energy and attention there, and it's supportive. So it's really, really wonderful, especially as an ally in our culture that, there's not a lot of support around that. So having a plant that can be an ally, especially for a young girl during that time, and is wonderful for cramps and PMS and all the other physical changes that are going on. Also just high in vitamins and minerals and tasty. So a really safe and easy one to incorporate. And then for the later transition of croning, this is a really wonderful remedy for helping change the reproductive process in the women's reproductive organs, and also as a tightening, toning herb for these organs. That is ever increasingly important as a woman ages, because then after menopause, a lot of women start to experience prolapse, or kind of these muscles losing tone. So I think, as much or even more so as during pregnancy, post-menopause, this is a really wonderful remedy, and it can be consumed in a tea, or even made as a tea and then sat in, so as a sitz bath, which is really nice post-birth too, for healing and tightening and toning back up those tissues. And I'll just show you real quick. It's very easy to harvest, and right now is a perfect time to harvest it. It's really good to harvest, like in the earlier part of the year, before it starts to fruit, because then it's going to put a lot of its energy into that fruit. So if we just pull up on the leaves, they almost are like screaming, harvest me. So easy. So, I just pull up on the leaves, or the hands, like I like to call them sometimes, and gather, as many as I'm looking to gather, and maybe shake out the bugs. And then I just put them in a paper grocery sack. And you don't want to layer them up too tall on top of each other, but a thin layer, maybe 2 inches or so, and then just fold that over a line. If it's outside, you're going to need to have it covered or bring it in at night, because it'll absorb the dew. But inside, in a place that's not getting direct sun but is dry, is really perfect. And then you can just shake that bag every day or two, and they'll dry within a week or two, depending on the humidity. And it's just really easy way to do it without having to make screens or have some big setup. So I just love to empower people to do it with what they have. And this is a super easy thing. If you're just going to go out and harvest one thing for tea this winter, it's a good one. And again, high in vitamin A and C, so it's a really good source of those things in the winter as well.
Awesome. This probably won't make the video, but I wonder about, you had mentioned like a sitting bath.
Yeah.
Could you also do like a steam, like a yoni steam with that?
You could, although I have to say I do not endorse them.
You don't endorse the yoni steam?
I don't.
Okay, I wondered what your opinion was on that.
Yes, I don't endorse the yoni steam. I don't have a strong opinion against it, but my instincts tell me it is not a good idea for maintenance. I think it could be a really effective tool for healing if there was a need for that and it was really indicated. But as a general thing, I don't know. My personal opinion is, as much as we can leave the vagina alone, we should, because there is a whole colony of stuff going on there that's very dynamic and very sensitive.
Similar to the gut.
Yes, exactly. And I'm not a big fan of big digestive cleanses either. I think, if they're needed and they're done well and they're intentional and spaced out, that can be good. But our body is made to detoxify itself all on its own. It has all the systems in place. So we don't really need to cleanse ourselves. We just need to support our detox organs. And I like the thought of that a lot better. Yeah.
Awesome.
So I will say here that none of this information is intended to treat or diagnose any disease or illness, and you should always talk to your healthcare provider before using any herbs or supplements.
And it doesn't hurt to do a deep dive consultation with your local herbalist.
That's a really good idea, because that is a wonderful way to find your own way to empowering yourself. If you have a good herbalist, that's what should be happening.
Building relationships.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and having that support so that you are able to take your health in your own hands and not feel alone in that at the same time, which is really important. Or just help navigating this crazy world. Sometimes that's what we need.
It's nice to have an ally.
Yes, certainly.
And that's something you offer through Bare Earth Herbals is?
Not through Bare Earth Herbals, actually. I have a different website now that is very new, so you could check it out. It's artesianwellnessmi.com, and that is where I am doing consults. But I also how I do them more often is, sometimes just by word of mouth is actually how I've been doing them for years. But also I have a local chapter of Herbalists Without Borders. And that is a national nonprofit, or a global nonprofit, sorry. So we host once or twice a year free mobile clinics, hoping to do it more in the future. So that can be a really good way to get a consult if it's something that finances are holding you back from.
Awesome.
Yeah.
One more question before we sign off.